Yeah, thanks a lot, Ville, for explaining the complexity of a change on a society level. And as you mentioned, it's all about the community, and there are a set of different stakeholders playing different roles. And maybe I would like to mention a little bit about the role of the corporate as a key player and key stakeholder in the society and in driving change. So if we take Nokia, for example, of course they provide infrastructure like mobile networks and so on, which is good, but the role doesn't stop there. They, of course, are involved in providing the latest cutting-edge technology and research, which is something that they can give to the city and help with driving a change. But most importantly is ESG initiatives that the corporate should be taking, and their societal contribution to the city and to the development of the city and the development of the sustainability programs and so on. And I think when it comes to ESG, we're all responsible for pushing the corporate side to commit more to ESG-related initiatives. And by ESG, I mean environmental, societal, and governance-related initiatives. And that's something we all can do by pushing the corporate towards this direction. Whether you are a user or an investor, you should always look into what kind of ESG initiatives the companies are working on. And also, the ESG score, of course, is a questionable thing. Like some say it's accurate, some say it's not really great. There are different models, and sometimes you find two different third-party companies bringing two complete different ESG scores. So what I would recommend, if you'd like to play an active role in that, is to, first of all, look if the company has done any of catastrophe when it comes to environmental, societal, or governance. So if it did, please try to avoid this company as a user or as a contributor, as an investor. That's one way. Or then if they didn't do that, look into their ESG score and how active they're trying to contribute to the city and society at large. So yeah, again, corporate is such a big key player in any society in the world. We have to be focused on that. We have to nudge them into doing the right thing. Many companies by default are doing that, but many as well are not. So I think that's our role. And also, when you work in a company, you should be looking into that as well as an active contributor in this company. Yes, that's my take on the company and corporate and their side of the equation of a very complex change that we all are involved in.
And when it comes to change, then let's introduce AI into the conversation. Why do we need AI in the field?
So what I think about first thing is taking ahead with the complexity. So when we talk about complexity in cities takes various forms. But what I focus for nature-based solutions is complexity, how city looks like how physically cities are there. So we know that cities are complex. They are not just like a single patch of forest, but rather they have complexity at different ways. So that heterogeneity is pretty complex, and we need to make it simple to really talk about the solutions. So when we have such complexity, such heterogeneity, how we make it simplified. So that's where the role of AI comes. With so many big data and everything, we know there is complexity in cities, and that complexity creates patterns. Which are repeated at certain scales, or let's say certain sites, let's say certain neighborhoods looks alike, certain neighborhoods do not look alike. So in that way we have patterns, and AI is all about recognizing patterns. And when I say AI, it's not the generative AI which I'm talking about, like something which we are using ChatGPT for creating text or analysis, but rather some other real deep learning models and ML algorithms. So they help us to identify complexity in the data, and they help us to have different data sources captured together to gain insights which can actually support different stakeholders and demands of stakeholders. Let's say it is not something which we can say it is a solution or it is a replacement for planning, but rather it can strengthen the decision makers to really see, okay, how can we simplify every complexity of the city we have.
Okay. And when it comes to AI, what we need is data sets. And how would you say we can build better and useful data sets?
Yes. Over there, I can start with an example, which we have recently conducted a city. So what we have over there is we were supposed to study the private urban green spaces of Helsinki metropolitan region. So let's say you have a domestic yard just around your house or something likewise. So we cannot, but we also know the studies about like identifying and managing private urban green spaces for biodiversity. But we also know that a bird would not decide just based on that specific plot, would it stay there or not, but rather it can comes from different scales, something something ahead of that plot as well. So in that case, we need to understand how does the landscape looks like. So over there, we have very huge complex spatial data sets. And so we let AI models to learn the patterns because we cannot identify the patterns altogether. Its manual identification is not easy. So there we use AI models to create and learn patterns by itself and tell us, okay, these are the patterns which are repeating across the city. And then once we have those patterns and we can have those interventions particular to that region, so rather than just focusing on, okay, this neighborhood is quite chaotic, we don't know what to do with it. But what if those certain neighborhoods repeats across the city? So in that case, we can have interventions plans all across those neighborhoods. So that's where I would say AI helps. It helps in easy identification of patterns. It also helps us to have at different scales, like it allows us to have volumes of data, and it provides you scalability to really do analysis, which was quite hectic, and it is complex to have different sources of data sets just translated into one simple information. So that's where I guess AI comes in.
And if I may build on that, is that what I hear as a civil servant, especially from the kind of strategy perspective, is that data and artificial intelligence makes our world more efficient and it provides more information. And when we look at urban planning, for instance, we get better results, we get better decision making for our, how to say this, for our near future, for things that and things that are decided and how to implement them better, and perhaps also to some things it provides data that you can have a more constructive debate even. And this is the point I would like to make, that in addition to what we heard, data and AI, especially let's say data in general terms or as a generic term, has an important role, because if we go to the grand challenges, the really complex challenges, if we look at the stories that are heard now, for instance at the national and multilateral form, it's always the story that's easy to tell. So those who have the loudest voice get to decide what's the story we hear now. But you know, when we have good data, then we can build the story based on that data. And that's why data and artificial intelligence and digitalization has more and more relevance also to the really complex, strategic, future-driven issues. So not only looking into how does our urban space look at, how does our city look like 2030, we can do that more efficiently now, as we heard, also looking into what happens 2050, 2060. I'll tell a short story. This is from a very small municipality, around 200 kilometers, well, little north from Turku city, if you know, southwest of Finland. And they had a small plot. And the city council, I think it was like 47 members or something, had to decide whether to give that plot to a gardener or to a car mechanic shop. And it was a big debate, you know, this and that, and this and that. And there was all the values, all the ecological competitiveness, vitality values there. But then they stopped and they started to look at what's the big data, where is this area going, you know, in the big area, and started to look at the numbers. And they decided that no, this is not the argument and a debate we should have, is that what is going to happen in this area 2050? And then that also helped them to decide that, okay, actually this area could be an important part for agricultural innovations, which automatically made it easy to decide what they will do. And this is kind of the role that I'm hoping a lot the data would have in the future as well.
Just to add one point over here, this is something which I think AI is capable of. It's something like predictive analysis, and at the same time having you the localized information, because just as you say, cities all across the globe are facing climate challenges. But when we talk about the solution, it needs to be localized. So that's where the AI can also play a role to provide you localized information for local insights and decision making.
Absolutely, and I'd actually like to draw a parallel of that to corporate world. Even in corporate, it happens often that at the end of the day, if there are no data, then it's a storytelling, it's narrative battle, and then it's very political. So then whatever is going to happen, whatever is a change is going to be implemented is all about the narrative, it's not about data. And AI is such an enabler, data analysis and big data, AI, they're such enablers that can push forward the right thing, the correct decision making, whether it's at corporate or at society at large. And that's such a powerful thing we didn't have before. It's also on the political scene, it's going to be the same. So it's such a powerful tool that's going to affect every aspect of our lives, but we need to be, again, I want to take it back to the active participation and the co-creation also, that we as individuals, whether we're part of a corporate or a school or whatever, we can be part of the solution. We can be part of the big data that's added, and also we should play an active role to co-design the solutions and to co-design the change that we want to see in the society. And now we're really way more able because we have the tools in place. And also, I think we'll be talking a bit about design thinking and co-creation, which is I'm a big advocate of. So, yeah, I think we'll get back to this point. But my key takeaway is that now we have the tools more than ever, and we should be more actively participating to push this kind of correct decision making based on data, and not just who has the stronger narrative and so on.
Yeah, definitely. And we mentioned that there are a lot of stakeholders. Thank you. As well as active participation. Maybe my next question would be how to better involve youth in those matters, both with employment, access to information, feel of responsibility. Do you guys have an opinion on that?
I can start. I can start. First intuitive idea would be to arrange hackathons. Mm-hmm. And I think that this audience hopefully can resonate with that. Sometimes I struggle with when we talk about youth. I would love to just talk about different stakeholders. Young people have a tendency to be able to look outside the box. Mm-hmm. Young people still, they don't know how tough it is, so they tend to make the impossible possible just by believing it and then making it happen. Having said that, if we start categorizing that, groups of people, with like elderly people, then people with special needs, and then young people, it's sometimes a bit unfair. So my point would be that we have this dream. We are hoping to make that a reality, hopefully together with this hackathon, is that could there be a physical, emotional, and methodological space where everyone could come and co-create? Because as Anna was mentioning, the co-creation process is the only way to go forward. It's a community and working and having that shared ownership. Now the big problem for many cities or communities is that when you go into that space, whether it's digital, virtual, or physical, you're sometimes feeling that you're not able to show your vulnerability. And if you're not able to show your vulnerability, you are not going to co-create. Because the fact is that our brain is built so that there's amygdala here behind, and the frontal lobe is here in the front. And remember, I don't know if you had this experience in a classroom when you were kids, but if you need to do something but the teacher is being really tough on you, for some reason, teacher was often tough on me, you don't think creatively, you try to survive. Now, it happens too often that different stakeholders, the youth, the elderly people, or other stakeholders, they come into this co-creation space still without that openness that is needed. So we need to find a way to build that, we call it city factory, where everyone can share their values, be heard, and can show their vulnerability. And I think this applies to all of the different groups.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I would like to add to that I think what you're mentioning, Villa, is the psychological safety. People wouldn't really be able to be vulnerable and to contribute if they don't feel included and they don't feel psychologically safe. And it's something that in the corporate world too, if a team member is not included, is not psychologically safe, he or she wouldn't be able to be an active contributor as much as the others. So it's sort of a requisite and super important condition before we go into the design thinking or the co-creation, which is such an important tool and powerful tool, is to make people feeling included so that they want to contribute and open up. And as a first stage of design thinking is to empathize and to show empathy, you should be able to show empathy to the people and listen really to their problems. And as in, for the involvement, I completely agree that we should involve everyone because, for example, if we're designing a new website, if the city of Espoo is designing a new website to provide a specific service, everyone is going to deal and use this website. Therefore, we should listen to everyone so that we make it inclusive to everyone. And that actually as well goes along if you're designing or making a change to the transport system. You should be inclusive. You should make sure that it's working for everyone. And then people will really use it. And then when people use the transport systems, the carbon footprint would get smaller and get reduced. So it's a win-win. So yeah, co-creation is such a powerful tool, but in order to have a successful co-creation design thinking process, we need to have people feeling included and psychologically safe to contribute in such a process.
Definitely. And would you say that AI comes into this process of co-creation? Could it be a useful tool? Could it be a useful way to encourage design thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question. That's something I've been as well trying to advocate for. And I think design thinking and AI go very well hand in hand. Not to take the human part out of the equation, not at all. The human has to be there. It's still, design thinking is a human-centric process, and it has to be. It's the whole idea is to make it human-centric around the problems of the user. Or the customer. And design thinking, by the way, is not only a product design or service design process, but it's also used to improve internal processes in companies. That's what I used in, that was my hypothesis in my MBA thesis. And also, I know that cities and bigger societal bodies use it to co-create, as Ville mentioned, for example, in city of Espoo. So how AI can help with design thinking? AI can accelerate the process so much, especially when it comes to ideation and prototyping. We bring the people, we understand their problems, we empathize with them, we show empathy, then we understand all the sorts of problems they have, we start defining these problems very well. Then we have a well-defined problem, and we want to ideate how to fix, or actually a set of problems, and we want to ideate how to fix these problems. So we bring in the AI and start the ideation process, and instead of having one or two or three ideas, we'd end up with tons of ideas, right? AI is super fast when it comes to ideation. Then it also helps us with the prototyping. It can help us build super fast prototypes, and then we take these prototypes with the users, we test them, and we get into this feedback loop to start again and see if there are still problems to fix. So I haven't seen such fast design thinking iterations as with AI. AI makes it like you can have one iteration in like 15 minutes, for example. In comparison to how it used to be before, when we really did the ideation in a 2 hours workshop, and then we had to go and build the prototypes ourselves as an engineers or so on. So it's such an accelerator, definitely, in my opinion.
In my opinion, design thinking comes with more of scenario analysis. So let's say we have an issue of, okay, this is an area where we want to develop as a green space. Okay, you want to develop a park over here, what are the elements which you can have? And based on the issues, you can use the issue as an action levers. Let's say this park needs to have inclusivity, so it needs to have different types of infrastructure within it so that it can be accessible for more than one type of people, or not type of people, but more than one category of people, whether it's more of like equity in terms of their ethnicity and their physical needs and whatnot. So in that way, AI can help us design the scenarios, and also with the 3 dimensions, we can always see, okay, if we place certain elements there, what could be the ways certain elements can be used and certain elements cannot be used. So in that way, I guess AI helps in scenario designing, which actually helps in design thinking.
Just a short contribution. I'll take one step back and then comment also the AI part very briefly. Is that if we look at the idea and theme of this hackathon, the future hackathon that's going to take place, you have 3 things that affect sustainable development or the shaping of the future cities. First is the footprint. We know that we are living, we are consuming too much, there's too much exhaust and emissions, and that's what we mean by the footprint. And that has to be brought down. And mainly that happens through systemic work. Of course, I mean, you can decide, please don't use cars, eat vegetarian food, etc. That's all very important. What we individuals do is very important. It's also very important what systems, how do we change the systems? And that's based on regulation, mostly. It's based because, you know, it's both carrot and discipline, love and discipline. And that's important. What is perhaps even more important is the handprint, the idea of handprint. Does anyone know what the handprint means? Thank you, there's people who raise their hands. One definition is that it's how do you create the future? So how do you create those products, those services, and those ideas that do not yet exist, but what we need to be able to have a prosperous and sustainable future? And that's where this hackathon comes into the picture. It takes the present state as a given, it uses the data, and then it invents the future. And that's how to define the handprint, and that is as important as cutting down the footprint. I'll bring a third element, and that's what we call the heartprint. And that's, I think we are talking a lot about here as well, that you cannot do this. So your idea and prosperous business is going to make you rich. I'm really happy for you. That's a little jealous maybe, but I can live with that. Mostly I'm super happy. But how do you create ownership? How do you scale? How do you bring everyone on board? You cannot do that without creating that shared ownership. And that's the heartbeat. That's taking the community with you. And so very important to recognize all these different categories and ways of thinking and approaching this big challenge. And my final point is that when we look at this multilateral, national and multinational world, what AI is going to do, it's going to be like the story of the emperor's new clothes. I'll give a very brief synopsis of that story. It's basically about the idea that we have too much things happening that only is going loops and loops of indefinite, non-decisive processes. I'm not saying European Union is one of them. No, not absolutely. My salary comes from the European Union. But I would say that what artificial intelligence will do, it will be so efficient to test ideas, even write reports that used to be the work of thousands and thousands of experts that just put paper from one desk to another. And this will hopefully be so that now those experts can do more efficient, more productive, more impactful work. My final point is, if we look at this moment and the future hackathon, the artificial intelligence will increase the value of human interface. Because artificial intelligence already is a great colleague or assistant in many expert work. It's going to emphasize what happens emotionally in situations like this, where you can really connect and start ideating and create new ideas.
Thank you for that. When it comes to sustainable city initiatives, when does design thinking come in, and how can that support this sort of initiatives?
Want me to quickly continue?
Sure thing.
My 5 pennies would be that you can say this, the glass can be half full or the glass can be half empty. What I mean is that if you look at the world today, you can honestly say that we are not doing that well. On the other hand, what we need to admit that we are doing many things quite well. So it's kind of like it's half full, half empty. What we need to do much better, and this goes to I think to our topic, is that when we say that cities are failing, what do we mean by that? I would argue that what we mean by that is that the multinational and national worlds are having big troubles at the moment, and the cities still need to provide everyday services. You know, like you can have all those big talks about, you know, big things, but at the end of the day, the children will need education, our elderly people will need care, and we need services, and we need those roads and lights, etc. So the rubber meets the road really in the cities. And I'm not saying the situation is a bit unfair at the moment if you look at what are the expectations versus the resources that we have. But my point is that for shaping the future or the cities of tomorrow will be all about understanding and respecting the structured multinational, national and local worlds, and at the same time building from bottom up the solutions at the community way. So for us, for me, the biggest challenge, so the most wonderful joy I will get when we co-create at the hackathon, and then the real work starts. How do we make that voice heard from those ideas, those hackathons, to the very complex world of national and multinational structures? Because by changing that system, by making those twists or nudges, is when we are able to change the big things.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think for us having these kind of hackathons as well is such a good playground to experiment with everything we're saying here. In a microcosm, in a small scale, we try every idea we're saying here. We try using AI and design thinking and co-creation and coming up with ideas and bringing all different perspectives. So I think it's such a good way to try it out on a small scale. When we talk about bigger scale and society and corporate, unfortunately, initiatives, transformation, innovation, sustainability initiatives fail for several reasons. We've already addressed one of them, is that stakeholders are not involved, and if not all stakeholders involved, probably you're building a solution that's only serving some and not all, then it wouldn't succeed. I think we established that quite clearly. But there are other reasons too. Weak leadership is one. Not having a strong change management plan, that's something me and Ville were discussing, that when you are launching a new initiative, a new transformation, a new change, it doesn't stop there. It's actually the work starts when you launch it. So you should have a very strong change management plan, because people, by default, we as humans, we don't like change, right? We have cognitive biases, one of which is the status quo bias. We like to stay in the current state. So change is not easy for us. Therefore, as a policymaker or someone working in corporate or whoever's person that's pushing this change, just know that the work would just start with that launch. And there should be a solid change plan, which includes communication, includes all different kind of tools. So I would love as well to experiment with that in the hackathon and to put some pressure not only on making a great idea, but making a great idea that actually sticks for long term. So looking into the change management now, how to make it long, sustainable initiative in a way.
What I think over here is like places like hackathons, they do provide a space where different stakeholders can actually engage with the challenges. When it comes for creating data sets using the AI for sustainability, what I think is it's always necessary for decision makers, sides to know what exactly do you need. And once they know, the researchers or let's say academia side, they can help you to create those data sets based on the issue, and that's where the AI comes for, and that's where the spaces like this helps to co-create the knowledge for sustainability transitions. So that's where we think of designs, of different scenarios, based on what different stakeholders' demand would be, and providing inclusivity.
We briefly touched upon stakeholders and how some stakeholders are not involved in this. I want to focus specifically on marginalized communities and how we could make them part of this sort of innovation discussions.
Maybe I can start with this one. So I think this gets back to the whole notion of psychological safety. If you have people who are marginalized, there is a reason why they feel this way. And you should look into that and look into how to make them more included, more psychological safe. And that's not an easy job, right? It's such a difficult thing to do in a society. And I think it starts with acknowledging the problem. Like, okay, we have a problem. There are people who are not included. We can see that in the politics and different arenas. So therefore, we should acknowledge the problem, give it the attention it needs, and then start designing like different solutions, different interventions. And to be honest, like, it's something that's not going to be solved in a day or a night. It's something that is long term. And I think Finland has had some problems, for example, with having disengaged male students in comparison to females, and many kind of problems. And they've tried many interventions for so long. And they're still trying. But it's good things that they acknowledge the problem and started acting. That's the first step. How long it's going to take depends, and it varies. But we should definitely stay hopeful and should keep trying.
Definitely.
Cities have typically been quite good at focusing also to marginal issues, people with special needs, elderly and youth, especially young people. Perhaps the thing that we could really do much better and learn more is that how could we do that? How could we do that as a community? So not only as civil servants and not only having one parliamentary group for elderly and one parliamentary group for youth, etc. These are very important, by the way. I want to emphasize that these parliamentary groups are extremely important. But then again, I think we are taking the right steps here as well. Because now if you create a business idea that helps, let's say, a very particular special group or with special needs, only in Europe you have, depending how you calculate, how do you categorize, you have from 6 to 10,000 cities. So you already have quite big customer base, even if it's a very kind of well-defined category. Then you, of course, you can think about how many other cities there exists. So, and my point, of course, being here that perhaps we could look at how to help, how to facilitate, how to support our marginalized communities or stakeholders better. And I think that looking at this handprint and heartprint idea could be one. Because the fact is that it's not, I think I love the point about male students, by the way, it's a real issue here in Finland, is that it's not only Finland who is struggling with financing the public sector. Honestly, if you look at the gross national product in terms of the spending, the amount of money we spend on the public sector versus the situation and the debt, you realize that it's a very complex and difficult equation already. So we need to find those new ways of keeping everyone on board and leaving no one behind.
Okay, thank you for that. I think it's super important to have as many stakeholders involved as possible. So we really should truly focus on that. I kind of want to move back and go back to AI for a bit, and specifically the state of AI in Finland. What opportunities / what challenges are we facing in here specifically right now?
So would you like to start this one? Okay.
Because it's again academic ideas.
My guess is that we are overestimating the role of AI at the short term. It's at the end of the day, it's still just a tool, okay? And I think we are going to underestimate the impact of AI in the long term. It's most likely going to change many things that we do not yet see in the, let's say, 5 to 10 years. So that's kind of like the big picture. Then the one challenge that most likely we are going to have is that who owns the algorithms? I mean, who owns our data? It's not just a security issue, it's that as well. It's also I don't know, this kind of, it's a social issue, it's a economical issue, and that's, I think things are happening so fast that no one has time to follow up on that. So I'm not saying it scares us at the public sector, but it definitely confuses us a bit, that how is this going to work? Because at the moment I think it's driven by a specific group of companies at the global level, and you know, there's a risk that we are left behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big question of who should be owning the algorithms, and also getting back to the question, I think definitely like AI will be changing the job market and the availability of jobs in many ways, but we should also be aware that, yeah, we're overestimating it now because it's trendy and all of that, so it's still in the start of the hype cycle. And I was just listening to Powell, the Federal Reserve chairperson in the US, talking about this, that it's not the only factors that plays in the unemployment rate and all of that. There are many other factors. Some of them are related to probably disengagement, like I was just mentioning, of Gen Z, for example, or something. So it's not the only factors that is out in play. It's going to affect a lot of the job markets and the availability of jobs and how the job market would look in the future. But I think for the most part, I believe it's going to be a net positive. The effect of it is going to be net positive. New jobs will come out the same things that happened with many other industrial revolutions. Just the world changed, the type and nature of jobs change, and so on. That's being said, it's such a powerful tool, and I think everybody should be able to use it and know how to use it and all of that, and be hopeful about this, of course, as well.
Adding to this, what I think is, if we talk of AI and the privacy and everything, so when we think of creating data sets using the AI for sustainability transition, what I think it's from the very starting point, cities and all together at the nation level, we need to come up with an ethical framework which can take care of data privacy. So, and also the distribution of information through different dashboards or let's say platforms, that needs to be there in more of a generalized manner, so that people can trust to the process of using AI in terms of city sustainability transitions and as well over there.
And as far as let's say the general society, we tend to be discussing AI specifically as LLMs. How can we move the attention away from LLMs and more towards data sets and and so on?
Well, LLMs are definitely part of, just like as Willie was saying, that it is everyone's colleague nowadays. So for sure there is that. But when it comes to creating data sets, and maybe you can get the ideas from LLMs how to do that. But creation always takes place beyond LLMs, more of predictive and discriminative and AIs. But to take this away from the discussion is something maybe Willie can add, how they are using in the city.
I definitely wouldn't want to share. We are just practicing. It's a bit hectic. Of course, it's in the big cities. I think you have several different approaches and processes. Honestly, I think at the systemic scale, everything is still very early on, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how you are going to use, or how the hackathon people are going to use artificial intelligence, and what do we actually mean by that? Is it ChatGPT for something, or is it some kind of algorithm or like a learning system? Because at the end of the day, it all starts from the need. Like, what is the need? What is the challenge that we are going to solve? And then you start looking at the tools, etc. And artificial intelligence for sure is one of them. And for typical experts, I think it's a nice, I would call it as a colleague, or at least a good assistant. We are not, I would say that at general level, we are not that good at giving good prompts, so we are not good at having a good discussion yet. Mm-hmm. So I think it's too early to say, really.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, that of course the generative AI is getting most of the attention. It's part of the hype cycle. But if we get back even before generative AI has been in the picture, there were a lot of usages really good applications for machine learning algorithms, neural network algorithms that are not large language models. For example, when I was working on my thesis in 2019, I was working on this kind of embedded AI algorithms that's helping with energy efficiency through controlling HVAC system. I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of applications on energy efficiency, waste management, and a lot of other things that has nothing to do with generative AI. And then as well with these, there is way less of a concern about privacy, because these are like closed systems where the algorithm is working, so we're not so concerned about this. So I think the only way for us is to start building this kind of awareness about that, guys. First of all, AI is not only about generative AI, and it's not as dangerous in many other applications. With Gen AI, definitely we should be concerned about privacy, and I would like to take back this to all of us, that that's our job to make sure that we're safe, right? We're not giving so much information. Be careful what kind of conversations you're having with it, because all of these, even if you delete the chat from ChatGPT, is still there, right? We all know that. So, but AI is way bigger than generative AI and LLMs, and it has a ton of applications that's helping humanity. So we should also shed some light on that when we're talking about AI. And I think we all should be raising the awareness and pushing towards this direction too, and educating ourselves, because such a big technology that's still emerging. Part of it is a hype, but I think there is another parts where we're not actually as excited as we should be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we still have a little bit of time. Maybe another question that I would have, probably specifically for Ville, is why sustainability initiatives fail at a city level? What seem to be the most common pitfalls?
That embeds the kind of idea that cities are failing, right?
Sometimes.
You didn't phrase it. Why are cities succeeding so well? No, I'm sorry for the sarcastic Nordic humor for that. I think we discussed this shortly a bit already. I think we are failing and succeeding at the same time. And the main reason is that we are still not able to channel the full energy of the community. Mm. So we are still struggling. I'm saying that we are understanding the challenge a bit. We are not just succeeding in implementation. I think, Ali, you made a point that it's one thing to create an idea and prototype, then it's a whole other thing to make that reality. And that's what we are still working on. To be honest, I think the situation is a bit unfair, because the role of cities is changing so fast. So I work a lot with our different units. So we have about 4,000 teachers, we have a couple of thousand engineers, etc., etc., etc. And I think they're doing fantastic work. They are very committed. Many of them are highly educated. They are trained and experienced professionals. Their bandwidth is totally congested. They are not able to think about sustainability. They are not able to think about vitality, because they are trying to keep the kids in the same classroom through that 45 minutes. Mm. So this is their everyday life. So it's very difficult to go and say to them, be transformative, change yourself today, when you are totally exhausted trying to keep those kids safe and teaching them things. So that's kind of the reality that we face. And then you can extrapolate that to the amount of regulations that we get from the national government or even the regional government, and then from the European Union in the case of Finland. So the amount of challenges is enormous, and it's only growing. And we strongly believe that the only way is to share a story. So the only thing is to get together and figure out how do we move forward. And I think that we are starting to see that this is the right way, but we are still struggling in the first steps. And that's why it's so important to have these interfaces, to have these discussions. Because if my kind of like final thoughts on the matter, if we are running out of time, partly is that this is now, as Mohammed stated in the early phase, is about the Eco Hackathon, which is both ecological and economical. And I bet that what Mohammed means is that it's also social and cultural. So it's the holistic view on sustainability. So social, cultural, ecological, economical, all of them. And when we start creating our ideas and businesses, I think that's one important step. Then the other one is that remembering that the idea doesn't have to be that big. It can focus on very small things. It can focus on LED lighting in our streets. But then you extrapolate that times 10,000 only in the case of Europe, and you have a fantastic scalable idea. That's like another thing, that you don't always have to have those grand world-changing ideas, but you can change one step at a time, and it's very impactful. Then the one thing, the third thing is, let's work on the things that we are committed to. Because I bet it's going to be a like winding, tough, rocky road that you are traveling towards your business. We have entrepreneurs here, so who would share their experiences, that it's going to take a lot of like 80% sweat and perspiration and 20% inspiration. And my final point is, don't go hunting alone. Like when you hunt alone, maybe you get a rabbit and okay, your family eats. But you go hunting together and the whole village will survive the winter. That's an old Finnish proverb. Don't go hunting alone. So use the power of your community, use the power of different stakeholders and connections. And if I'm allowed, one very, very final point,
sure,
is that it's good to also have fun while doing that. I mean, no one said that that's illegal or silly. Actually, if we look at the cognitive neurosciences, Ali here is a biohacker as well. When we are having fun, that's when we are most creative as well. That's when we are most open. So in a sense, fun is a very serious thing in the world that we live in.
All right. I think that next we can ask the audience if there are any questions. Of course, we have the questions that you submitted when you registered, but if there are some now, we can go through those first. I think I can take one.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I'm happy and glad that you all recognize complexity, and I guess now I want to add more complexity. And Ville, you talk about community and also about forgotten things, and something very important is missing, I think. When you talked about the stakeholders, you didn't include the more than human world and the entanglement of the city with the ecosystem and the ecosystem services. So I think it's crucial to also recognize that as part of the community, of the city community. And maybe also, how can we use AI and other tech to also account for them, for the more than human world? I think it's important to, for example, use it to understand like migration patterns of animals across the city, or to understand the noise and light pollution as well, and to change and to do things better. So I think there are two questions. What do you think about recognizing that as part of the community of the city, and then how can we use modern tech and AI to learn more about how can we do things better? Thanks.
Thank you. Two quick. So thank you for the questions. I think thank you for adding the ecosystems. Perhaps they were embedded there behind. Absolutely, it's a vital part. For me, the ecosystem word is a kind of like it's a vitality, economic vitality word. So perhaps it's just that I come from a different discipline, more like a strategy-driven discipline. But thank you. That's absolutely the system. And just to emphasize that ecosystem, in the case of Espoo, for instance, is not only about the municipal boundary, the geographical boundary, but it's at least European. Most cases, it's across more or less the planet. So there are things that we can learn in an ecosystem manner with Shanghai, for instance, or with Cairo perhaps, or with some other city. Unfortunately, many of these are quite lateral, meaning that they are city-to-city network-driven. That's where at least we feel that we benefit the most. There should be more multilateral as well. That's where I think that we are not succeeding too well. Why is that? I don't know. I think it could be a political question to some extent, like a hierarchy-driven, but that's another panel discussion. To the part of the mapping, using artificial intelligence or data for mapping those, there are some really good success stories as well. I'll mention one, is that in Espoo, we actually built a highway across the highway, but the highway that we built was for squirrels, so that they can hop over the existing highway from Espoo to Hanko city, so that the boys and girls could meet. The boy and girls squirrels. I struggled a bit myself, to be honest, to think that is this worth the but it was a political decision, and so we built it. But absolutely, to be more serious, yes, there's definitely more space for that, and there are better people to answer those questions than me. But I would say that to some extent these are recognized issues, and they are very often fruit and energy for big political passions as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. So we've talked about AI, but when we talk about like sustainability, and then the engagement and involvement of different stakeholders matters. Actually, I want to know how the city of Espoo actually bring the wisdom of the crowd of different stakeholders, citizens, corporates, different companies that work with the city, to be able to actually prioritize different initiatives, because there are lots of ideas. We can use AI or people to bring lots of initiatives, basically, infinite number of initiatives, but we have limited resources. So how, whether it's happened before or there's some plans to actually integrate and use the wisdom of the crowd of all stakeholders to prioritize and choose those initiatives that will be most sustainable.
I'll start, and then we can have other comments. Is that first is that I think the real challenge is not a technological challenge. The challenge is not that we wouldn't have the systems or even the software. I think the big question about sustainability is that are we able to transform ourselves? We can create a platform that can easily, let's say that we can send a request that share your thoughts about what the city should do. And we do that a lot. Like we use one company that we work a lot with, is Maptionnaire, for instance. They create this map base that you can walk there and say that I would really love to have a plant, a flower here or something. And I think these are very important things. What keeps me wake up at night is that does that transform that individual? That, okay, first, does he or she feel that now she has ownership for the city? Like, I feel that they are listening to me, that we are working together. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that, do I transform? Do I become more in harmony with the challenges that exist? And that is the true community collaborations that we seek for. And that's what I meant when I talked about this dream, about this city factory. That could there be a space, perhaps it's virtual, perhaps it's physical, I don't know, but where you could come in and feel psychologically safe and open and respected, and you walk out different. And because that's the hope. That is the way towards hope, that we are able to be the best versions of ourselves. So those two things, yes, we need more ways. We are working on them. We recognize this challenge, that how do we commit people, how do we create shared ownership, and I think there are good things happening. But then the underlying root cause, what we need to do is we need to be the best versions of ourselves. That is difficult.
Yeah, thanks, Ville. I think you answered it perfectly. Maybe I'd like to add to the part where there are a lot of ideas. So we have infinite number of problems, a lot of ideas, and finite resources, very finite resources in the most part. And this is a problem in corporate or in city or anywhere in the world. There's always a finite number of resources. And that's where prioritization comes into play. So that's why I think active participation is really important. Again, that if there is a problem that many people have, but the city doesn't know about it, that's not good, right? You want to bring your voice and make sure that you're heard. That goes along psychological safety and all of that. So it's a two-sided problem. Everybody has part in it. City to include more people, or the corporate to include more people, but the people also to play their active role. That's extremely important. And then when it comes to prioritization, there is one part that's usually disappointing for people, And I see it a lot in corporate. Somebody comes to us with an idea, and on paper it's great, but they don't have the big picture. So sometimes we let them down, and it's very disappointing for them. But in the grand scheme of things, we know that this is something we cannot implement now or in the near future, and that we need to prioritize other things that we know of. So it's as well a fine balance to prioritize what kind of transformation or change initiatives to work on now. But nonetheless, we should always be striving for new ideas and to add them in our backlog of ideas, and when the time is right, we're able to take one problem at a time, one new initiative at a time. I think that's the best approach.
And somewhere I believe that these spaces of co-creations, since everyone feel belong to that space, which is something which community whole idea is about, so people also start taking responsibilities in these spaces. Okay, we can take care of something just near to our house or make it better, because I live in Wanda, and I see that there have been certain initiatives where people started taking on their own, like taking care of roadside vegetation and likewise. So it's also like making people take the ownership for things, and that is something which comes for co-creation, because planners cannot work at every scale, but if you want to have the transformation, it starts in various ways, and these spaces gives you an idea about how you can also create better city for yourself or better immediate surroundings. So yeah.
Hello, my question might be a bit off topic, but since you guys talked about innovative AI culture and tech as advancements, yet we somehow fail to address the most basic issues. Recently we had flash floods both in India and Pakistan, yet no one was able to predict those catastrophic events. We're having a genocide happening in real time in Palestine, yet no AI model is able to provide a feasible solution to that. Even if we have a solution on paper, it is somewhat biased. So I really want to understand, as an individual, like how do we see this AI culture, and how can we put it to use both mindfully, and since the humanity is just back to its survival, and there's something that's even more faster than AI transformation, and that is climate change, I would say. So do you guys really believe that we're putting AI enough to good use, or our priorities are still other stuff, I would say? Yeah, thank you.
What I would say in terms of the flash flooding situations, it's more of the implementation side. AI can help you to synthesize the information and synthesize information at different scales, let's say different cities, because if we talk about Nordic cities, then they are somewhere similar in terms of what they are in terms of their geography and landscape. But when we talk about tropical cities, then they are all very dense and they have their own chaos. But definitely the implementation of AI can be more of information synthesis, but the implementation part is something which lacks, I guess, and that needs a better co-creation with the different stakeholders of the city planners. Okay, what different cities needs and how we can make it better. So that is something which I can add to. But yeah.
I would just brief. What I hope that we could do more in city of Espoo, I think that's what I can answer from my institution and the role is that, part of this dream is this kind of idea that we don't have to agree about everything, but let's disagree about things around the same table. If we would be able to have that kind of mentality, that you don't have to take things into the final conflict, but you could be respected and have your own space, even though you disagree or some disagrees with you. That is perhaps what I mean by this idea of, and I think it takes back to the point that you made with your question, that many things cannot be solved easily. Some things cannot be solved at all. I think that was also that not every idea will become a company, but there could be transparency and dialogue. That's kind of I think the things that we are aiming towards.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that, and that's a disclaimer, that's my own opinion. Well, with many of the problems you mentioned, I think it's a problem of execution. It's not a problem of whether there's a solution or not. So for the floods, I'm pretty sure that the states you mentioned, Pakistan and India, could have done something about it, but they didn't. That's definitely leadership problem. And I mentioned one of the biggest reasons change fail is because of leadership. Leaders should be force of change and also should be leading by example. And when we go to the genocide, it's definitely, we all know that's wrong. We don't need an AI to tell us that. But the reason it's happening is because of leadership, power dynamics in the world. But I think, again, back to the active participation, we as people, we have the power to actually push the leaders towards action. But that's being mentioned and that's being said, execution is a completely different game than ideation, and execution is definitely way more difficult because in the real world, there are way more factors that we don't take into consideration while we're planning or strategizing and so on. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you all for your time today. I think that's all we have time for. I want to thank once again our amazing panelists.